The drive into the North Dakota oil field took longer than expected. The last 20 miles of road were unpaved and riddled with potholes that threatened to shake my rental car to pieces. By the time I pulled up to the main office, a weathered single-story building with peeling gray paint, my back ached and my mood had soured. This wasn't how I'd planned to spend the next 6 months of my life, but the money was too good to pass up. 3 times my usual rate for half a year's work meant I could finally put a down payment on a house when I got back to Minnesota. The parking area was packed with dusty pickup trucks and a few cars that looked like they hadn't moved in weeks. I grabbed my duffel bag from the passenger seat and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The site sprawled in all directions, a maze of pump jacks, storage tanks, and equipment I couldn't name yet. The whole place smelled like a mix of diesel fuel and something else I couldn't quite place. Other new hires trickled in alongside me, all of us marked by our clean work clothes and uncertain expressions. The veterans were easy to spot. They moved with purpose, their faces weathered and eyes constantly scanning their surroundings with a wariness I didn't understand yet. A stocky man with salt and pepper hair stood by the office entrance, checking names off a clipboard. When I reached him, I extended my hand. Christopher Mitchell, reporting for the Tuesday shift. He ignored my outstretched hand and just nodded once, checking something off his list. Rodriguez is waiting inside. All new personnel report to the main room. The office interior was no more impressive than its exterior. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating a space filled with metal desks, filing cabinets, and outdated computer equipment. About a dozen other new workers already stood around awkwardly, waiting for whatever came next. A door at the back of the room opened, and a man who could only be William Rodriguez entered. He carried himself with the rigid authority of someone who'd earned his position the hard way. Deep lines etched his face, and his dark eyes scanned us with an intensity that made several people shift uncomfortably. "Welcome to Dakota Ridge Oil Field," he began without preamble. "I'm William Rodriguez, site supervisor. You've all passed the physical requirements and signed the necessary paperwork, so I'll keep this brief." He moved to a desk and picked up a stack of laminated cards, each about the size of a playing card. "Every worker gets one of these. Keep it on you at all times." He began distributing them, moving through our group with efficiency. When he handed me mine, I glanced down at the card. It contained 4 numbered rules in bold black text. 1. If you see your double, hide immediately. Do not let it see you. 2. When storm alarms sound, follow emergency protocols without question. 3. Avoid the man in the black tuxedo. Do not speak to him if encountered. 4. Never answer the phone after 4 in the morning. I couldn't help but snort. Was this some kind of initiation prank? I looked around, expecting to see others smirking, but most were studying their cards with serious expressions. The guy next to me, a tall, lanky man with a scraggly beard, caught my eye and gave me a nervous smile. "Something funny, Mitchell?" Rodriguez had stopped directly in front of me, his eyes cold. "No, sir," I answered, then couldn't resist adding, "Just wondering if this is some kind of joke. My double? A man in a tuxedo at an oil field?" The room went silent. Rodriguez's expression didn't change, but somehow his stillness became more threatening. "You think safety protocols are a joke?" His voice remained level, but carried an edge that killed my smile. "Every rule on that card is written in blood. People who ignore them don't last long here." He turned away from me and addressed the whole group again. "Your crew assignments are posted on the board. Shift starts in 30 minutes. Get your gear and report to your stations." As the group dispersed, Rodriguez caught my arm. "Mitchell, this isn't like other sites you've worked. Follow the rules, all of them. No exceptions." There was something in his eyes, not anger, but a kind of resigned knowledge that finally got through to me. I nodded, suddenly feeling cold despite the overheated office. "Yes, sir." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and safety orientations. I was assigned to a drilling team along with 4 others, including the bearded guy from orientation who introduced himself as Robert Chen. Our equipment supervisor, a weathered man named Davis, walked us through basic operations before setting us to our tasks. 3 hours into my shift, I was already sweating through my coveralls despite the cool temperature. The work wasn't complicated, but it required constant attention. I monitored pressure gauges while operating one section of the massive drilling apparatus, making adjustments as needed and logging readings every 15 minutes. I'd almost forgotten about the strange laminated card until I took a short break to grab water from a nearby cooler. As I unscrewed the cap on my bottle, something caught my eye near the storage containers about 50 yards away. A flash of the same orange safety vest I was wearing. At first, I thought nothing of it. Dozens of workers wore the same standard gear, but as the figure moved between two containers, something about their gait made me pause mid-drink. They moved with an odd hesitation, like someone trying to remember how walking worked. The figure paused, then slowly turned around. I saw my own face staring back at me. Not similar, identical. Same stubble I'd hastily trimmed that morning. Same small scar above my right eyebrow from a childhood accident. Same work clothes down to the company logo placement. It was me standing 50 yards away, watching myself. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing. A twin. Impossible. Some kind of prank with masks. The distance was too great to see that level of detail. Then it smiled. The smile stretched too wide, pulling at the corners of my doppelganger's mouth in a way that human muscles shouldn't allow. And its eyes, what I could see of them even from this distance, were wrong. Completely black, like holes punched through reality. The first rule on the card flashed in my mind. If you see your double, hide immediately. Do not let it see you. But I couldn't move. My muscles locked up as the thing began walking toward me with that same jerky, unnatural gait. It moved with increasing confidence as it approached, its steps becoming smoother. By the time it stood 20 feet away, it walked exactly like me. The wrongness in its eyes remained, black orbs without whites or irises. But otherwise, I was looking at a perfect mirror image. "Hello, Christopher," it said, using my voice but with a hollow quality, like someone speaking into an empty metal drum. "You weren't supposed to be looking this way." I tried to back up but bumped against the water cooler. "What are you?" Its too wide smile never wavered. "I'm you, the better version that's going to take your place." "That's not possible," I managed to say, though my voice cracked. The thing circled me slowly, moving with exaggerated casualness. "It's already happening. I know where you sleep now. I know which bed is yours in the worker dormitory. I know your employee number is 84732. I know you have a sister named Rebecca who calls you every Sunday." My blood went cold. I'd mentioned my sister to no one here. "How do you—" "I told you. I'm you." It stepped closer, and I could smell something coming off it, a metallic scent like copper pennies. The others were smarter. They hid when they saw me, but you made it easy. It circled me for what felt like hours, but must have been only minutes, describing details of my life no stranger could know. With each revelation, my terror deepened. This wasn't a prank or hallucination. Whatever this thing was, it knew me inside and out. Finally, it stopped circling and stood directly in front of me. "I'll be back for you soon, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but I'll take your place, and no one will notice the difference." Then it simply turned and walked away, heading toward the main road with my exact walking pattern. I stood frozen, unable to call out or run, watching as my own form grew smaller in the distance until it disappeared behind a line of equipment. I don't know how long I stayed there, but I eventually slid down against the water cooler, my legs no longer able to support me. My hands shook so badly I couldn't even open my water bottle. The world had shifted on its axis, reality cracking open to reveal something impossible beneath. "Hey, you okay down there?" The voice startled me so badly I knocked over the water cooler. A man stood a few yards away, watching me with concern. He approached cautiously, keeping his hands visible like he was approaching a frightened animal, which I realized was exactly what I must have looked like. "You're white as a sheet, man." He crouched down to my level. "I'm Nicholas Turner. You're one of the new guys, right?" I nodded, still unable to form words. "You saw it, didn't you?" His voice dropped lower. "Your double." The simple acknowledgement that what I'd seen was real, that Nicholas knew about it, broke something in me. Words tumbled out in a disjointed rush as I described my encounter. Nicholas listened without interruption, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. When I finally ran out of words, he helped me to my feet. "You broke the first rule," he said simply. "You were supposed to hide." I froze, I admitted. I didn't believe it was real. Nicholas glanced around, checking if anyone was within earshot. "Nobody does at first. That's why we lose so many new hires." He sighed. "Look, it saw you. It knows where to find you now. That's bad. What is it? What does it want?" "To replace you." Nicholas's eyes met mine and I saw genuine fear there. "And now it knows exactly where to look." The clock ticked past 11 that night as I crouched beside the damaged pump housing, my hands still trembling slightly from my encounter with my double earlier in the day. The memory of its black eyes and too wide smile kept flashing through my mind as I tried to focus on the task at hand. My flashlight beam wavered across the rusted metal as I held it steady for Nicholas, who was deftly removing bolts from the access panel. "Hand me the socket wrench," Nicholas said, not looking up from his work. I passed him the tool, grateful for the simple, mechanical task that anchored me to reality. 3 other workers, Robert Chen, the bearded guy from orientation, and 2 others whose names I hadn't caught yet, worked on different sections of the pump. The only sounds were the metallic clinks of tools, the distant hum of active machinery, and the occasional grunt of exertion. The night shift had a different feel from the day. Darker, emptier, with fewer people around to distract from the vastness of the oil fields stretching into the darkness. Most of the site was illuminated only by harsh floodlights that created sharp contrasts between bright areas and impenetrable shadows. Those shadows made me nervous now, after what I'd seen earlier. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" Nicholas asked quietly, keeping his voice low enough that the others wouldn't hear. I nodded, focusing on holding the flashlight steady. "Hard not to. Try. The more you think about it, the more it knows." He tightened another bolt with practiced efficiency. "That's not just superstition. We've noticed patterns." I wanted to ask more questions, but Robert had moved closer to us, concentrating on a section of damaged valve. I hadn't told him about my encounter with my double, and based on Nicholas's cautious tone, that was probably wise. The repair work continued for hours. Despite the cool night air, sweat beaded on my forehead from the physical exertion and the constant tension of wondering if my double might appear again. Every time I glanced toward the shadows beyond our work area, I half expected to see myself staring back. Nicholas seemed to notice my unease. "First night shift is always the worst," he said in a normal voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You get used to it." Robert looked up from his work. "You've been here how long?" 3 years, Nicholas replied, sliding under the pump to reach a difficult connection. "Longer than most." "What's the turnover rate like?" I asked, trying to sound casual while silently wondering how many workers had been replaced by their doubles. Nicholas's eyes met mine briefly, a warning in them. "High. Oil field work isn't for everyone." By 1:30 in the morning, we were making good progress on the repair. The damaged section had been completely removed, and we were preparing to install the replacement parts. The monotonous work had finally helped calm my nerves somewhat, though I still found myself scanning the darkness every few minutes. Robert Chen worked beside me, carefully cleaning the mounting surface where the new component would attach. He seemed eager to impress, working faster than necessary and occasionally making small mistakes that required correction. "Slow down," I told him after he dropped a bolt for the third time. "We've got all night." Robert smiled sheepishly. "Sorry, just want to get this right." I understood his anxiety. We were both new, both trying to prove ourselves worthy of the extraordinary pay this job offered. Before today, that had been my only concern too, doing the job well, earning my keep. Now I understood why the pay was so high. We weren't just being compensated for hard physical labor, but for facing dangers none of us had been properly warned about. At precisely 2 o'clock, a shrill wail cut through the night air. The alarm system activated across the entire site, lights flashing red atop every building and structure. Nicholas immediately dropped his tools, not bothering to secure them or finish what he was doing. "Move! Now!" he shouted, already sprinting toward a supply shed about 50 yards away. "The shed! Run!" I didn't hesitate. The urgent tone in his voice and the memory of Rodriguez's warnings about storm protocols kicked my body into motion before my mind fully registered what was happening. I abandoned my tools and ran after Nicholas, heart pounding. "What's happening?" Robert called from behind me. "Red storm," I shouted over my shoulder, though I had no idea what that actually meant. "Come on." 2 of our crew were right behind Nicholas, moving with the speed and purpose of people who understood the danger. I followed, pushing my tired muscles to their limit. Behind me, I heard Robert's footsteps, but they sounded too distant, too slow. I risked a glance back and saw Robert still gathering his tools, seemingly unwilling to leave them scattered across the worksite. "Leave them," I yelled. "Robert, run." He finally dropped the tools and started jogging toward us, but his pace was casual, as if he didn't grasp the urgency. The alarm continued its piercing wail as I reached the supply shed. Nicholas pulled me inside and slammed the heavy metal door behind me. "Where's Chen?" he demanded, scanning the group. "Coming," I said, moving to the small window on the door. He was slow to... The words died in my throat as I saw what was happening outside. A thick crimson mist was rolling across the field from the east, moving not like normal fog, but like something alive, pulsing, reaching, curling around obstacles with purpose. It moved faster than any natural weather phenomenon I'd ever seen. Robert was still 20 yards from the shed when he noticed the red mist approaching. His casual jog turned into a sprint, but it was too late. The leading edge of the mist caught him, swirling around his legs first, then rapidly climbing up his body. His scream was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Not pain exactly, but pure terror mixed with something else I couldn't identify. It lasted only seconds before cutting off with unsettling abruptness. The red mist thickened, completely obscuring Robert from view. "We can't help him now," Nicholas said quietly, pulling me away from the window. "Stay back from any openings." I stumbled backward, horrified by what I'd just witnessed. "We have to do something. He's out there." Nicholas shook his head grimly. "He's gone. That's rule number 2. When storm alarms sound, follow emergency protocols without question." He didn't. The shed fell silent except for our breathing and the muffled wail of the alarms outside. The other workers sat on crates or leaned against walls, their expressions showing a mix of resignation and fear. They'd seen this before. "What is that stuff?" I whispered, unable to look away from the window, though I could no longer see anything through the thick red mist that now enveloped the entire area. "We don't know exactly," Nicholas replied. "Management calls it a red storm in the official reports. It comes through about once a week, always at night, usually around 2 or 3 in the morning." One of the other workers, a heavy-set man with a thick mustache, spoke up. "My theory is chemical leak, companies covering up some toxic gas release by calling it a weather phenomenon." Nicholas just shrugged. Believe what you want. Doesn't change what it does. We waited in tense silence for about 15 minutes before Nicholas cautiously approached the window again. The red mist was dissipating, thinning out until we could see the worksite again. He opened the door slowly, checking in all directions before stepping outside. The rest of us followed. Where Robert had been caught by the mist, there was nothing but his clothes. Work boots, coveralls, hard hat, and safety vest, all lying flattened in the dirt as if he'd simply vanished from inside them. No blood, no body, no sign of struggle beyond the scuffed earth around the discarded clothing. Jesus, I breathed, staring at the empty clothes. What happened to him? Nicholas picked up Robert's hard hat, examining it before placing it with the rest of his belongings. Nobody knows, but he's the third this month. The other workers began collecting Robert's personal effects with practiced efficiency, placing them in a plastic bag that one of them retrieved from the shed. The matter-of-fact way they handled it made it even more disturbing. This was routine for them. His family, I said suddenly. Do they get told what happened? Nicholas gave me a long look. Official cause of death will be industrial accident. That's what all the paperwork will say. We returned to our repair job after that, though none of us spoke much. I went through the motions mechanically, installing components and tightening connections without really focusing on the task. My mind kept replaying Robert's scream and the sight of his empty clothes. At exactly 3 o'clock, another alarm sounded, different from the first, more of a low pulsing tone than a shrill wail. Green warning lights flashed instead of red. Green storm, Nicholas explained, continuing to work. We can ignore this one. It's just rain and wind. Sure enough, about 5 minutes later, a light rain began to fall, accompanied by gusts of wind that seemed entirely normal. After witnessing the red storm, this ordinary weather felt absurdly anticlimactic. The green storm passed in about 20 minutes, leaving everything slightly damp, but otherwise unchanged. We finished the pump repair shortly before 5 in the morning. As we packed up our tools, I found myself looking at the spot where Robert's clothes had been collected. The ground there seemed no different from anywhere else. No mark, no stain, nothing to indicate that a man had vanished there hours earlier. What actually took him? I asked Nicholas as we walked back toward the main building. And how do you explain to someone's family that they're just gone? No body, nothing to bury. Nicholas kept his eyes forward. Like I said, industrial accident. Rodriguez handles all that paperwork. There's a standard procedure. But his family will never know what really happened to him. Would you want to know? Nicholas looked at me directly. If it was your brother or father, would knowing the truth make it any easier? I had no answer for that. We walked the rest of the way in silence, the first hints of dawn lightening the eastern sky. My mind was filled with questions that had no answers, and the growing certainty that there was something fundamentally wrong with this place. Something beyond the obvious danger of my double or the red storm. As we returned our tools to the storage area, I wondered what else lurked at Dakota Ridge oil field that wasn't covered by the 4 simple rules on my laminated card. I wondered how many more Roberts there had been before I arrived, and how many more there would be. Most of all, I wondered if I would be next, claimed by a red storm, replaced by my double, or lost to some horror I hadn't even encountered yet. The following night dragged on like a death march. I kept seeing flashes of his empty clothes whenever I closed my eyes. Boots, coveralls, and hard hat arranged in a human outline with nothing inside them. The image stuck with me through my fitful sleep during the day and followed me back to the night shift. Nicholas and I barely spoke during the first few hours. What was there to say? The company would write it off as an industrial accident, file the paperwork, and that would be that. Another name added to whatever list they kept of workers who never made it home. By 1 in the morning, my eyes burned from exhaustion. The drilling module we'd been repairing kept acting up, pressure gauges jumping when they shouldn't. Nicholas finally waved me off. "Take 15, he said, not looking up from the control panel. "You're dead on your feet." I nodded gratefully and headed for the small break room attached to the main office building. The walk helped clear my head a little, cool night air filling my lungs as I trudged across the dark stretch between work areas. Floodlights cast harsh white pools at regular intervals, leaving pockets of darkness between them that seemed darker than they should be. The break room was empty when I arrived. Just a mini fridge, a wobbly table with mismatched chairs, and a coffee maker that looked older than me. I poured myself a cup of sludge that passed for coffee and collapsed into a chair facing the window. Outside, the parking area sat half full of vehicles, pickup trucks mainly, most of them dusty and mud-splattered from the unpaved access roads. The moon cast everything in pale blue light, making the scene look almost peaceful if you didn't know what kind of place this was. That's when I saw him. Between two pickup trucks stood a man in a black tuxedo. Not work clothes, not casual wear. A full formal tuxedo with a crisp white shirt and bow tie. He was tall and perfectly still, like a mannequin someone had placed there as a prank. His posture was rigid, arms straight at his sides, head facing forward. The sight made no sense. Nobody would wear formal clothes to an oil field, and certainly not at 1 in the morning. I sat up straighter, coffee forgotten as I stared through the window. Something about him made my skin crawl, not just the out-of-place formal wear, but how absolutely motionless he stood. No shifting of weight, no small movements that normal people make without thinking. Nothing. As I watched, the figure slowly turned his head toward the window, just his head, while his body remained perfectly stationary. The movement was mechanical, too smooth, like a security camera pivoting. Then he looked directly at me. I couldn't make out his features clearly at that distance, but I felt his eyes lock onto mine. A powerful urge washed over me to stand up, walk outside, and approach him. The compulsion grew stronger with each second of eye contact, my legs tensing as if preparing to rise of their own accord. My hand was already on the chair, pushing myself up, when the laminated card in my pocket dug into my thigh. Rule number 3 crashed back into my consciousness. Avoid the man in the black tuxedo. Do not speak to him if encountered. I tore my gaze away and nearly knocked over the table, getting to my feet. My coffee spilled across the surface, but I didn't care. I turned my back to the window, heart hammering against my ribs. The urge to go outside persisted even without visual contact, like an invisible hook trying to drag me toward the door. I left the break room immediately, not daring to look back through the window. My hands shook so badly I had to shove them in my pockets to hide it as I hurried back toward the drilling site. The further I got from the office building, the weaker the pull became, until finally it faded entirely. Nicholas looked up as I approached, frowning at what must have been a ghastly expression on my face. "You okay? You look like you saw a ghost." "The man in the tuxedo," I said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else was within earshot. "I just saw him in the parking lot." Nicholas's expression darkened. "Did he see you?" "Yes, we made eye contact." "Did you speak to him?" "No. I remembered the rule and left." Nicholas let out a slow breath. "Good. That's good. 2 for 4 so far on the rules." "What happens if you talk to him?" He shook his head. "Don't know. Never met anyone who broke that rule and lived to tell about it." After a moment, he added, "Let's get back to work. Best not to dwell on it." The next few hours passed in a blur of mechanical tasks and constant vigilance. Every shadow made me tense. Every unexpected sound jerked my attention away from my work. I kept expecting to see the tuxedo man watching me from the darkness beyond the floodlights, but he never appeared. By 4 in the morning, exhaustion had settled into my bones. Nicholas and I had finished the repairs on the drilling module and moved on to routine maintenance tasks. The night had grown colder, and a light rain started to fall, making everything slick and miserable. "I need to grab the inspection logs from the office," Nicholas said, zipping up his jacket against the rain. Can you finish calibrating the pressure release valve? Sure. I nodded, focusing on the task to keep myself awake. He headed off toward the main building, leaving me alone with the equipment. I worked methodically, my mind half blank with fatigue as I adjusted settings and checked readings. The rain picked up, pattering against metal surfaces around me. When I finished, I decided to meet Nicholas at the office rather than wait in the rain. The walk back seemed longer this time, my boots dragging through muddy puddles that reflected the floodlights above. The main office building looked almost welcoming, with its windows glowing yellow against the dark. Inside, I found the office empty. No sign of Nicholas. Water dripped from my clothes onto the linoleum floor as I looked around. The inspection log sat on the desk, but Nicholas wasn't there. Maybe he'd gone to the bathroom or to check something else while he was in the building. At exactly 4:15 by the wall clock, the phone on the desk began to ring. The sound cut through the quiet office like a knife, making me jump. My first instinct was to ignore it. Who would call at this hour? But then I remembered Nicholas might have gone to a different part of the site and could be calling with instructions. Exhausted and not thinking clearly, I picked up the receiver. Hello? Silence for a moment, then a voice spoke. My voice, but wrong. Hollow and metallic, like someone speaking through a long pipe. Christopher, my own voice said. I've been waiting for you to answer. Come outside. Someone wants to meet you. Ice spread through my veins as I realized what I was hearing, my double on the other end of the line. The fourth rule flashed in my mind. Never answer the phone after 4 a.m. I slammed the receiver down and backed away from the desk, nearly tripping over a chair. The phone immediately began ringing again, shrill and insistent. I left it there, ringing in the empty office as I tried to steady my breathing. That's when I noticed the floorboard, slightly raised near the corner of the desk, as if it had been pried up and not properly replaced. In my panic, I might not have seen it at all, but my boot caught the edge as I backed away from the phone. I knelt down and lifted the loose board. Underneath, in a small, hollow space, sat a folded piece of paper. The paper was old and yellowed at the edges, torn from a notebook. I unfolded it carefully, revealing a handwritten message in hurried, jagged letters. The office computer has the way out. Password is your employee ID number backwards. I stared at the note, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood. The handwriting looked desperate, scratched quickly with what must have been a dull pencil. Who had left it there? How long had it been hidden? The phone finally stopped ringing, leaving the office in sudden silence. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket just as I heard footsteps approaching down the hall. Quickly, I pressed the floorboard back into place and stood up, trying to look casual as Nicholas walked in. There you are, he said, grabbing the inspection logs from the desk. Find anything interesting while you were waiting? I shook my head, feeling the note burning a hole in my pocket. Nothing worth mentioning. I pocketed the note as Nicholas picked up the inspection logs from the desk, my heart still racing from the phone call. My double had spoken to me using my own voice, and now I had a cryptic message about a possible way out. Every instinct told me to share this with Nicholas, but something held me back. Trust was in short supply at Dakota Ridge. Nothing worth mentioning? Nicholas asked again, his eyes narrowing slightly. Phone was ringing when I came down the hall. Yeah, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't answer it. Nicholas stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Good. You remembered Rule 4. Actually, I did answer it, I admitted, watching his reaction carefully. Just for a second before I realized what time it was. Nicholas cursed under his breath. What did you hear? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Nothing. Just silence. Then I hung up. The lie came easily. Too easily. I didn't know why I was keeping the truth from Nicholas, who had helped me survive so far. Maybe it was the note burning a hole in my pocket, or maybe it was the growing suspicion that no one at this place was exactly what they seemed. You're lucky, Nicholas said, gathering the inspection logs. Let's get back to work. 2 hours till shift change." The remaining hours of the night shift crawled by with excruciating slowness. Every task required concentration I couldn't muster, my mind constantly returning to the hidden note and the chilling phone call. I made stupid mistakes, dropping tools, missing readings, forgetting basic procedures. Nicholas noticed but didn't comment, probably attributing it to fatigue and the trauma of losing Robert to the red storm. The sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky when our replacements arrived. Day shift workers trudged in with coffee cups and tired eyes, receiving our handover reports with minimal conversation. Most of them already knew about Robert. The news had spread across the site like wildfire. "Ready to head back?" Nicholas asked as we signed out of our equipment logs. "You go ahead," I said, feigning a yawn that wasn't entirely fake. "I want to check something with maintenance about that pressure valve. It's still acting up." Nicholas looked skeptical, but didn't press the issue. "See you at the dorms then." I watched him walk away, heading toward the worker dormitories where I should have been going. Instead, I circled back toward the main office building, keeping my distance and staying out of sight. I needed to wait for the right moment when the office would be empty. The day shift supervisor was Martin Davis, a balding man with perpetually sunburned skin who took his morning walk around the site at precisely 6:15 each day. I'd noticed this pattern during my first days here. The routine inspection took about 20 minutes, giving me a window of opportunity if I timed it right. I waited behind a storage shed, watching Davis exit the office building and start his rounds. As soon as he was out of sight, I made my move, walking quickly but casually toward the main entrance. If anyone saw me, I'd say I forgot my water bottle. But luck was on my side. The early morning shift change had everyone focused on their own tasks. The office was empty when I slipped inside, just as I'd hoped. The ancient computer sat on the desk where I'd seen it before, its beige casing yellowed with age. I settled into the chair and pressed the power button, listening to the machine whir and click as it struggled to life. After what felt like an eternity, the login screen appeared. A simple prompt asked for a password. I pulled out my employee ID card and read the number backward, 75291384. With slightly trembling fingers, I typed it in. The screen went black for a moment, and I thought I'd made a mistake. Then green text appeared, scrolling across the screen like something from an old movie. "Emergency exit activated. Maintenance tunnel access granted. Go now." A soft mechanical click came from behind me. I turned to see the heavy filing cabinet shift slightly on its own, revealing a narrow gap between it and the wall, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. I hesitated. This could be a trap. The note could have been planted to lure me into something worse than what I was trying to escape. But then I heard it. The distinctive sound of expensive shoes on gravel outside, approaching the building with measured, unhurried steps. I moved to the window and carefully peered out. The tuxedo man was walking toward the office, his posture unnaturally straight, each step identical to the last. And next to him, matching his pace perfectly, was my double. It no longer bothered hiding its unnatural smile, its black eyes fixed on the building where I stood. They knew. Somehow, they knew exactly what I was doing. I had seconds, maybe half a minute before they reached the door. My options had narrowed to one: the tunnel. I grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from the emergency kit mounted on the wall, checking that it worked with a quick flick of the switch. The footsteps drew closer. I could hear two sets now, the crisp click of formal shoes and a heavier tread that mimicked my own gait perfectly. The door handle jiggled. I lunged for the gap behind the filing cabinet, sucking in my breath to make myself as thin as possible. The metal edge scraped against my back as I squeezed through, tearing my shirt and probably my skin too, though adrenaline masked any pain. The gap opened into darkness, absolute, complete darkness that even the powerful beam of my flashlight barely penetrated. Behind me, I heard the office door open, followed by the tuxedo man's calm, measured voice. "Mr. Mitchell, I believe we had an appointment." I didn't wait to hear more. I pushed farther into the darkness, feeling my way along a rough concrete wall. The passage narrowed until I was forced to crouch, then to crawl on my hands and knees. The flashlight beam bounced wildly as I moved, creating disorienting shadows that seemed to move independently. Behind me, I heard the filing cabinet being pushed aside with surprising ease. They were coming after me. The maintenance tunnel was cramped and lined with rusted pipes that occasionally dripped foul-smelling water onto my head and shoulders. The concrete floor scraped my knees raw through my work pants, but I kept moving, fighting the panic that threatened to overwhelm me. The beam of my flashlight revealed only more tunnel stretching ahead, seemingly endless in the darkness. I crawled as fast as I could, ignoring the pain in my joints and the growing sense of claustrophobia. Behind me, I heard the office door slam open and heavy footsteps searching the room. I had gained some distance, but they would find the tunnel entrance soon enough. My breathing echoed loudly in the confined space, each gasp for air sounding like a shout to my terrified ears. The light of my flashlight bounced off the rusted pipes and damp walls, creating strange, shifting shadows that my mind transformed into reaching hands and pursuing figures. All I could do was keep moving forward, away from the horrors that had claimed Robert Chen and threatened to claim me next. Away from my double with its too wide smile and empty black eyes. Away from the man in the tuxedo whose mere presence had filled me with an unnatural compulsion. I had broken free, I hoped, but the tunnel stretched ahead, like a throat swallowing me into unknown depths, and I had no choice but to continue, crawling through the darkness on bleeding knees, following the only path available, downward, away from everything I knew, into whatever waited below. The maintenance tunnel closed in around me like a coffin. Rusted pipes ran along both sides, leaving barely enough space for my shoulders. The flashlight beam danced across wet concrete as I crawled forward on hands and knees, each movement sending spikes of pain through my raw skin. Behind me, the office door slammed open with enough force to rattle the pipes overhead. Heavy footsteps moved across the room, searching. "Find him!" said a calm, measured voice that had to belong to the tuxedo man. "He can't have gone far." I crawled faster, ignoring the sharp edges that tore at my work pants and the foul-smelling water that dripped onto my back. The beam of my flashlight showed nothing but more tunnel stretching ahead, a throat of concrete and metal swallowing me whole. The sounds from the office grew fainter as I put distance between us. I kept moving, counting my breaths to fight the panic clawing at my chest. The tunnel seemed endless, my knees and palms raw and bleeding from the rough concrete. The flashlight beam weakened, its yellow glow growing dimmer with each passing minute. After what felt like several hundred yards, the cramped passage finally opened into a wider concrete corridor. I stood up for the first time in what must have been at least 30 minutes, my joints cracking in protest. The ceiling here was high enough that I didn't need to stoop, though not by much. I swept the flashlight around, taking in my new surroundings. Old emergency lights were mounted along the walls at regular intervals, most of them dead, though a few flickered with weak electrical pulses that cast the corridor in bursts of sickly green light. The walls were bare concrete, discolored with age and moisture. The air hung heavy and stale, carrying a sharp metallic taste that reminded me of blood. I started walking, moving as quickly as my stiff legs would allow. The passage curved left, then right, following no pattern I could discern. All the while it sloped gradually downward, taking me deeper beneath the oil field. The flickering emergency lights created shifting shadows that played tricks on my eyes. More than once I stopped and spun around, certain someone was following close behind, only to find empty corridor stretching back into darkness. I checked my watch, 6:45 in the morning. By now, Nicholas would have noticed I hadn't returned to the dormitory. Would he look for me? Report me missing? Or would he simply assume I'd fallen victim to one of the site's many dangers, like Robert had to the Red Storm. The passage descended more steeply now, the floor changing from smooth concrete to rough-cut stone steps worn in the center from years of use. Who had built this place? It looked older than the oil field operation above. Much older. I'd been walking for nearly an hour when I first heard it, a rhythmic scraping sound from somewhere behind me. Not footsteps exactly, but something metal being dragged across concrete. Slow, steady, deliberate. I froze, holding my breath to listen. Scrap. 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 The sound paused, then continued, closer now. Whatever was making it moved faster than a normal walking pace. I picked up my speed, no longer caring about conserving energy or being quiet. The passage continued its downward trajectory, the steps becoming steeper and more uneven. The scraping sound grew louder despite my increased pace. My walk became a jog, then a full run, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly across the walls and ceiling. My lungs burned from the stale air and exertion. Scrap, scrap, scrap. The sound stopped suddenly, cutting off mid-scrape. The silence that followed was absolute and somehow worse than the noise had been. At least with the scraping, I knew where the threat was. Now it could be anywhere. I ran until my legs gave out, finally stopping to catch my breath at a point where the passage leveled out briefly before continuing downward. Bent over with hands on knees, I gulped air that tasted of rust and decay. The silence stretched on, broken only by my ragged breathing. After my heart rate slowed enough that I could hear past the blood rushing in my ears, I turned around to check the path behind me. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty corridor. Except it wasn't empty. 20 feet away stood the man in the black tuxedo. He wasn't breathing hard. His tuxedo showed no signs of dirt or wear despite crawling through the same filthy tunnel I had. Not a hair was out of place. His polished shoes gleamed in the flashlight beam. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, his voice as calm and composed as his appearance. "I believe we have a scheduled meeting." He smiled, a perfect, practiced gesture that never reached his eyes. Those eyes were the worst part. They looked human at first glance, but something about them was wrong, like they were painted on rather than real. "You've gone to considerable trouble to avoid our appointment," he continued when I didn't respond. "Quite unnecessary, I assure you. I merely wish to discuss your future with the company." I backed away slowly, keeping the flashlight trained on him. He didn't move to follow, just stood there with that same empty smile. The emergency light behind him flickered, and in that brief green flash I saw his shadow spread across the floor, a shadow that didn't match his human shape at all. "Your predecessor also tried to run," he said. "It's a common reaction, but ultimately futile. There's only one way this path leads, Mr. Mitchell." "What are you?" I managed to ask, my voice rough from the dry air. His smile widened slightly. "I'm the Human Resources Director, of course, and you have been selected for promotion." The words hung in the stale air between us. My mind struggled to process what he'd said while every instinct screamed at me to run. The tuxedo man's smile remained fixed and polite, like a mask that had been carefully crafted to mimic human expression without understanding it. "No, thank you," I said, backing away slowly. "I quit. Consider this my resignation." His smile didn't waver. "That's not one of your options, Mr. Mitchell." He took a step toward me, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete floor with perfect rhythm. "Your predecessor also tried to decline the promotion. They all do at first." I turned and ran, no longer caring about direction or destination, just away from him. My flashlight beam bounced wildly across the walls as I stumbled down the uneven stone steps. My lungs burned with each breath of the metallic-tasting air. Behind me, I heard the steady click-click-click of his shoes on the stone. He wasn't running, just walking with the same measured pace, yet somehow he wasn't falling behind. I pushed myself harder, my legs already aching from crawling through the maintenance tunnel. "There's nowhere to go but forward, Mr. Mitchell," his voice called out, sounding as if he were right beside me despite the distance between us. The passage began to change as I ran deeper. The rough-cut stone steps gave way to smooth concrete flooring. The ceiling, which had been low enough to nearly brush the top of my head, gradually rose higher. The emergency lights, which had been sporadic and flickering, now appeared more frequently, glowing with steady, bright illumination. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw only empty corridor stretching back into darkness. The Tuxedo Man was gone, but that brought no relief. Somehow his absence was more terrifying than his presence. The passage widened further, the walls changing from bare concrete to painted drywall. Overhead, the exposed pipes disappeared, replaced by ceiling tiles identical to those in the main office building. The floor beneath my feet transformed from concrete to industrial carpeting, worn thin in the center from years of foot traffic. After several more minutes of running, I came to a door. A simple wooden office door with a frosted glass window, just like the entrance to the site supervisor's office upstairs. I stopped, breathing hard, and stared at it. There was no way this could exist down here, hundreds of feet below the surface. I had two choices: go back toward the Tuxedo Man or see what lay beyond this impossible door. I grabbed the handle and pushed it open. The room beyond was exactly like the office I had fled upstairs, the same desk positioned in the same spot, the same filing cabinets against the wall, even the same ancient computer sitting on the desktop. The only difference was the absence of windows showing the outside world, and sitting behind the desk, hands folded neatly on its surface, was the Tuxedo Man. He wasn't smiling now. "Please, Mr. Mitchell," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Sit down." I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind unable to make sense of what I was seeing. How had he gotten ahead of me? How had this office come to exist deep underground? "How did you—" I began. "There are aspects of this facility that don't follow conventional rules," he cut in. "You've noticed this already, I'm sure." I stepped into the room, but didn't take the offered seat. My flashlight, which I still clutched in my white-knuckled grip, seemed pathetically inadequate in the well-lit office. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Want?" He tilted his head slightly, the gesture too precise to be natural. "I don't want anything from you, Mr. Mitchell. I'm simply here to facilitate your transition." "Transition to what?" "To your new position, of course." He opened a drawer and removed a stack of laminated cards, identical to the rule cards we'd been given during orientation. "You've followed the rules perfectly. Even breaking them was according to pattern." "I don't understand." "Few do, at first." He placed the stack of cards on the desk between us. "William Rodriguez has served his time as supervisor and has been replaced. You are his successor." "William?" I shook my head. "What happened to him?" "The same thing that happens to all supervisors eventually. He was replaced." The Tuxedo Man's expression never changed, but his eyes, those painted-on eyes, seemed to harden. "As you have replaced him." Something on the wall caught my attention. What I had initially taken for decorative panels were actually windows that somehow showed the oil field above. Through them, I could see workers moving between buildings, equipment running, all the normal activity of the site, and walking across the yard, wearing a supervisor's uniform and carrying a clipboard, was my double. It moved with perfect mimicry of my walk, stopped to check something on the clipboard with my exact head tilt, even raised a hand to greet a passing worker with my same casual wave. It was me, up there in the world, living my life. "What is happening?" I whispered, more to myself than to the Tuxedo Man. "The system continues," he answered anyway. "Some people are meant to leave. Others are meant to stay and maintain order. You, Mr. Mitchell, are now part of the foundation upon which everything else rests. He pushed the stack of laminated cards toward me. You'll be responsible for training the new workers, making sure they understand the rules, the importance of following protocols. He tapped the top card with one perfectly manicured finger. The red storms, the green storms, the doubles, the phones that ring after 4 in the morning. All of it must continue. I picked up one of the cards, feeling its weight, the same lamination I'd touched that first day when Rodriguez had handed me my own card. That seemed like years ago now. And if I refuse? That's not an option, as I explained. The tuxedo man stood up, smoothing his jacket with practiced motions. William tried to refuse as well. They all do. But the choice was made long before you arrived at Dakota Ridge. Through the windows, I watched my double enter the main office building, greeting workers with my smile, speaking with my voice. No one seemed to notice anything wrong or different about it. You'll find that everything you need is here, the tuxedo man continued, gesturing to the office around us. The new orientation group arrives tomorrow morning. I suggest you review the materials before then. He walked to the door, each step identical to the last. Before leaving, he turned back to me. One more thing, Mr. Mitchell. You may feel isolated at first, but you're not alone down here. The others will help you adjust. Others? I asked. Previous supervisors. Not all of them, of course. Some didn't adapt well. His smile returned, that perfect, empty expression. William will be around. Somewhere. With that, he left, closing the door behind him with a soft click. I stood in the silent office, holding the stack of laminated rule cards, watching through impossible windows as my double lived my life on the surface. I would never see the real sun again, never feel actual rain or wind. My entire world was now this underground replica, this shadow version of the place I'd tried to escape. I sat down heavily in the chair behind the desk, William's chair, now mine. The ancient computer hummed to life without me touching it, the screen showing a list of new employee names. Tomorrow's orientation group. I set the rule cards on the desk and stared at them. 4 simple rules that I now understood were not warnings, but a test. A selection process to find the next person to be brought below. Outside the windows, the red storm alarm began to sound. Workers ran for shelter as crimson mist rolled across the field. My double watched from the safety of the main building, checking names off a list as workers filed into shelter rooms. I was meant to stay here, in the depths beneath the North Dakota oil fields, to maintain the system, to teach the rules to new workers until one of them replaced me, just as I had replaced William. The computer screen flickered, showing me security camera feeds from around the site. Everything I needed to monitor the workers above, to watch for those who broke the rules, to identify my eventual replacement. I picked up a pen from the desk and began to read through tomorrow's orientation materials.